Hi, my name is Maylene, and thank you so much for being here because today we are going to be talking about the mythological house of Atreus and the curse that plagued its generations. Where all of the troubles start. Tantalus, by most accounts, was the son of the god Zeus by a mortal woman named Pluto. There are some sources that list his father as being a man named Tmolus. However, his parentage actually does not affect his story at all, so we will not dwell on that. I'm just telling you for some color. There are some historians who believe that there may have been a historical Tantalus. It's the same thing of like, is there a historical Jesus? Is there a historical Tantalus, right? Although no one is like actively, as far as I know, no one's actively examining the historicity of Tantalus in the same way that they're examining the historicity of, say, like Jesus or King Arthur. Experts suspect that the historical Tantalus would have been the ruler of an Anatolian city named Tantalus, not Tantalus with a US, Tantalus with an IS. And that would roughly translate to the city of Tantalus, so his city. Although there are no surviving ruins of such a city, the Roman historian Pliny claims that Tantalus was destroyed by an earthquake and the city of Sipylus was built in its place at the foot of Mount Sipylus. I'm telling you this because the mythology is indecisive about which kingdom Tantalus was the king of. He's referred to as the king of Phrygia, yet the location of his kingdom, which is clearly stated to be at the foot of Mount Sipylus, was located in the western extremity of Anatolia, where the kingdom of Lydia was situated. Different place entirely, right? We know historically that that was a kingdom called Lydia. So while Lydia and Mount Sipylus is in the western extremity of Anatolia, the kingdom of Phrygia is understood to be more west center. So just imagine this right here in front of my face, where my hand is Phrygia, and then right over here is Lydia, right? Okay. Furthermore, and I'm like jumping ahead a bit, I'm going to be jumping around all over the place here. His son, Pelops, has been referred to as Pelops the Lydian, which has led some scholars to the conclusion that Pelops and Tantalus belonged to an early house of Lydia that might have like branched off to form the kingdom of Phrygia. I don't know, but this is why some sources cite Tantalus's father as being Tmolus, the name of a historical or legendary, but like historical legendary king of Lydia, because they're like, okay, we can like connect those two guys, right? Cool. So sources differ on whom Tantalus married. The more popular options include Dione, the daughter of the Titan Atlas, Eurynace, daughter of Pactolus, a river god of Anatolia, or Eurythemista, daughter of the river god Xanthus. Those are our three main options for Tantalus's wife. Or maybe it was all three of them. We don't know. The Roman poet Ovid cites Dione as Tantalus's wife. That's Ovid's opinion. Everyone else has a different opinion. So the couple had four children: Pelops, Niobe, Broteus, and Dascylus. This is presumably their birth order, although that probably also doesn't really matter. From least to most relevant in our story today, first, least relevant, Dascylus. He married Anthemoisia, the daughter of the river god Lycus, and became the king of the Anatolian kingdom Mysia. They had a few sons who died, but overall, if they don't have their own Wikipedia page, they don't really matter to me. His life, as recorded in stories, is chill. Nothing really happens to him except that his sons died. But I guess it wasn't important enough for them to have a Wikipedia page. So I don't know, dog. Second least important, Rhodius. Now, in his myth, he was a famous hunter who refused to honor Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. And he also bragged that fire could not hurt him. Crazy thing to brag about, dog. Don't do that. So, Artemis, because she hates him because he does not honor her at all, she drives him to madness, and then he eventually sets himself on fire and he dies because he's gone mad via Artemis. Third, Niobe. She married Amphion, the co-founder of Thebes, along with his brother Zethus. Zethus? Zethus. I read that wrong. Zethus. The couple had 14 children, Too many children, by the way. Want to get that out there? Too many children. 7 sons, 7 daughters. Very convenient, a very clean number, a very holy number, right? Okay, 7, not 14, 7. These 14 children were known as the Niobids. This is important because, as told in the Iliad and Ovid's Metamorphoses, Niobe, during a procession honoring the goddess Leto, who was the mother of the twin gods Apollo and Artemis, Niobe arrogantly boasted that her accomplishments in having 14 children compared to Leto's 2 children was more worthy of honor and reverence. We are forgetting the fact that Leto was in active labor for, oh, I don't know, a really long fucking time because Hera just did not allow her to give birth because they're the children of Zeus. And she was like, girl, we cannot be having more of his children around. Anyways, so Niobe's boasting. She's like, oh my god, I had 14 children. Leto only had 2 children. That's not impressive at all. And enraged by this, Leto sends her children to enact their revenge. Apollo kills all 7 of her sons, and Artemis kills all 7 of her daughters. And in most versions of the story, Niobe's husband, Amphion, kills himself as well out of grief. So the entire family is dead. And because of that, Niobe then escapes Thebes and returns to Mount Sipylus, where she is turned into stone and continues to weep to this day. It's an actual stone on the mountain that if you look at it from a certain angle and when it rains, it resembles a woman weeping. This is like a real thing. Google it. Now we're going to get into the most important of Tantalus' children, which is Pelops. And Pelops is the most important because his myth directly relates to the myth of Tantalus. Pelops and Tantalus, they're like this, okay? They're a package duo. If you're going to talk about Tantalus, you're going to talk about Pelops. Pelops' story also has a lot to do with Tantalus's ultimate punishment in Hades, or his ultimate punishment in the underworld, in which he has to endure an eternity of standing in a pool of water beneath a fruit tree with low-hanging branches, and he is never able to quench his thirst or his hunger. This specific version of the punishment, which is the most well-known version of the punishment, is depicted in the Odyssey, and the crime for which involves Pelops, but I will explain that in a moment, because Tantalus is also associated with a similar crime and punishment that differs from the previously mentioned, the more popular one, right? Or at least in my opinion, it's more popular. I know about that one. I didn't know about these other ones that I discovered when I was researching. In another version of the story, Zeus swears an oath that he will give Tantalus anything he wants. Anything he wants. Tantalus asks that he be allowed to live like the gods. And this is a stupid request to make. Don't do that. Although he is furious, Zeus is bound by his oath to do this. He doesn't want to, but he has to do it. So he grants Tantalus that wish. But as punishment for attempting to raise himself to the status of a god, Zeus places a giant boulder above his head so that Tantalus, who has access to a banquet akin to that of the gods, right? Like he's rich, he has all of these fine foods, his table is overflowing. But if he tries to eat it, the rock might fall on him. He doesn't know when the rock is going to fall on him, but he is constantly living with that fear that the rock is going to fall on him and crush him, right? So he's like, he has all of these nice things and he got what he wanted. There's also a rock above his head. So this specific myth is the most popular in the earliest surviving records, in the earlier surviving Greek sources. The story involving Pelops appears comparatively later, and here's the story. So Tantalus, king of Phrygia, experienced cordial relations with the gods. I don't know how he got these relations, I don't know what he did, but he is experiencing like cordial, not quite friendly, but like respectful relations with the gods. By some accounts, he has been invited to dine with the gods. In other accounts, he invites the gods to dine in his hall. One day, Tantalus decides to murder his eldest son, Pelops, murders the boy, cooks him into a stew, and he serves that stew to the gods. The reason for why he decides to do this differs. Some sources claim that in murdering his son, Tantalus intended to make an offering to the Olympians. See the story of Abraham and Isaac in the Old Testament of the Christian Bible, right? It's kind of a similar thing. God is like, hey, Abraham, I know this is your only son and you've been begging for a son for years, but I want you to take your son Isaac up to a mountain and I want you to sacrifice him to me. And then Abraham is like, okay, I will do that, God. I will do that for you. And then he's about to like murder Isaac. And then God is like, okay, you passed the test. You don't have to murder him. It could be like that situation. Other sources say that Tantalus was testing the gods' omniscience. He wanted to see if they would be able to divine what had happened. Upon arriving to the banquet, most of the gods had realized what had happened to Pelops. They did not eat the Pelops stew, right? Demeter, unfortunately, who was currently grieving her daughter Persephone, who had been recently abducted by Hades and taken to the underworld to be his queen, right? This is all recent. This is all happening at the same time, right? She's grieving. She's not doing well. Her mental health is cracked, insane, not good. She absent-mindedly eats the stew, and she specifically eats what would have been Pelops' left shoulder. Yikes! Because of this crime, Tantalus is banished to Tartarus, which is the farthest level of the underworld that one could go. If I'm remembering my Percy Jackson correctly, that is the farthest level of the underworld anyone could go. That's like where major punishment happens, right? So Tantalus is banished to Tartarus, and according to Pindar, who is one of the 9 canonical lyric poets of ancient Greece, Pelops was revived in a cauldron and stitched back together by one of the 3 fates, Clotho, who's the one who's in charge of spinning the thread of human life, right? There's 3 fates. One of them spins it, one of them cuts it, and then I don't really know what the third one does. And his left shoulder, which Demeter ate, was replaced by an ivory shoulder made by Hephaestus. Now, listen. Okay, I'm not going to question it too much. How did they get how is it that the left shoulder was the only part that was missing? When you're cooking meat, let's talk about like a chicken, okay? You're cooking a chicken, you're cutting up the chicken, you're getting rid of some bits. There's no way that, also the bones, were the bones in the stew? Did they have to make him new bones? There's no way that they threw the stew into a cauldron, right? They said bubble, bubble, boil, and trouble. And then he just came back without a shoulder, but he got a new shoulder, a cooler shoulder. Where's his bones? Did he get cooler bones? Anyways, also according to Pindar, who again is telling us that Pelops was revived in a cauldron, according to him, none of this actually happened. None of this ever happened. Actually, Tantalus didn't murder his son, he didn't cook his son, and instead, Poseidon, the god Poseidon, abducted Pelops because he wanted the young boy to be his lover. I don't know how old Pelops is. I'm assuming by Greek standards, he's gonna be like under 12. If you didn't know, the ancient Greeks love their pedophilia. They're not actually like super pro homo, if you know what I mean. Because that was part of like the coming of age process, especially for young boys of a higher class. Yeah, you can take this 10-year-old boy to be your lover. So this story, according to Pindar, is that Poseidon abducted Pelops because he wanted him to be his lover, and the story of his death was a rumor spread after his disappearance by Tantalus's enemies. So Tantalus's enemies heard that Pelops disappeared because Poseidon abducted him, but no one knew Poseidon abducted him. So his enemies were like, oh, Tantalus murdered and cooked his son. Also, according to Pindar, that story isn't true. In this third version of the story that he's telling us, after Pelops' sudden death and resurrection, so yeah, he did still die and was resurrected. Apparently he wasn't abducted, but he did die and was resurrected. Whether or not in this third version of the story he was murdered and cooked by his father, don't know. But after he died and was resurrected via cauldron, Poseidon took Pelops to Olympus to be either his lover or his apprentice. Neither of these are good options. If you know the story of Ganymede, you know that neither of these options are good. So Pelops is on Olympus, being either Poseidon's lover or apprentice, and Zeus, who is still angry at Tantalus, throws Pelops out of Olympus, presumably Hephaestus style, when he throws Hephaestus off the mountain. So Pelops is back on Earth now. Regardless of what happened, fuck you, Pindar, You make my life difficult. Regardless, upon being resurrected via cauldron, Pelops left Anatolia because it had a really bad vibe now, and he went to mainland Greece, and he ended up in the city of Pisa. By this point, he's an adult man. By the way, this is not Pisa in Italy, Leaning Tower style. This is in the Peloponnese region. So he goes to Pisa and he meets Hippodamia, who is the princess of the city, and he immediately decides that he wants to marry her. But her father, King Onomos, is doing everything in his power, literally everything in his power, to prevent his daughter from marrying because he received a prophecy that he would be killed by his son-in-law. Everyone is receiving prophecies. Too many prophecies. So whenever Hippodamia has a new suitor, her father challenges the suitor to a chariot race. If the suitor wins the race, they will be allowed to marry her. However, Onomos defeats all of the suitors, and once he defeats the suitors, he has them decapitated, and their heads are mounted in the columns of his palace as a warning to all other suitors from coming to seek his daughter's hand in marriage. This cannot be good for political relations. You are isolating yourself. Your kingdom will be besieged. As a suitor, Pelops is challenged to a chariot race, and he accepts. But he knows he would lose because there's a trend going on. People have figured out what's happening. He invokes Poseidon, his maybe former lover, maybe just a god, and Poseidon gifts him a chariot drawn by untamed Pegasi. Pegasi are the horses with wings. However, given Onomos's track record of killing Hippodamia's suitors, we have the track record hung up on the palace wall as a decoration. Here you see. Pelops is still unsure about his charioteering abilities. I don't really think he's very good at charioteering, given that he left his home after being murdered and cooked into a stew by his father at a young age. And he's been traveling around mainland Greece since then. I don't know when he would have had time to be trained in charioteering, but nevertheless, Pelops convinces Onomos's charioteer Myrtilus, who is a son of Hermes, to help him win the contest. He promises that if Pelops wins the contest, then he will give Myrtilus half of Onomos's kingdom, bad, and the wedding night with Hippodamia, aka her virginity, bad, and evil. First of all, you're going to marry a princess, and upon marrying that princess, you are going to become king of that city. But your plan is to give half of that kingdom that you're going to inherit via marriage to some guy. Also, you're going to give that guy your new wife's virginity? Girl, don't do that. Now, Myrtilus agrees to this plot because he loves Hippodamia. He wants to marry her himself, but he was always too afraid to ask her father for her hand in marriage because he has a tendency of decapitating her suitors. So, of course, he says yes to Pelops' proposal. How could he refuse? So, Myrtilus ends up sabotaging Onomos's chariot by replacing the bronze linchpins that were attaching the wheels to the chariot axle with pins made of beeswax. Significantly less sturdy, they're going to break easily. So at the very moment that Onomos is about to kill Pelops in a brilliant feat of dramatic irony, the chariot breaks and Onomos is dragged to death by his horses. He is dead, and Pelops has won the chariot race, so he gets to marry Hippodamia now. Not only does he get to marry Hippodamia, but he also immediately becomes the king of Pisa. This is awesome. He does not have to wait for his father-in-law to die because his father-in-law died immediately. Upon becoming king of Pisa and marrying Hippodamia, Pelops has Myrtilus murdered. And he has Myrtilus murdered for one of three reasons, maybe all three of them. One, Myrtilus tried to seduce Hippodamia, who was his prize for helping Pelops, but Pelops retracted that promise like a bitch and had him killed. Second option, is that Myrtilus tried to rape Hippodamia, which I feel like is kind of the same as reason one, but whatever. And three, Pelops did not wish to share the credit for his victory, and so he had Myrtilus murdered so that Myrtilus couldn't rebuke against Pelops' claim that he did it on his own. Either way, this ends with Pelops having Myrtilus thrown over a seaside cliff to his death, and Myrtilus curses Pelops and his entire line, thereby adding to the divine curse already cast upon the family by Tantalus's original sin of filicide and cannibalism, right? No one had verbally cursed Tantalus when that happened. No one was like, I curse you in your line. But the fact that he did such atrocious acts, killing his son, making him into a stew, kind of doesn't bode well for the genetics of this family. Something wicked this way comes. Something wicked is going to get passed down through the bloodline generations and generations. There's something rotten in the state of Denmark. So, as king and queen of Pisa, Pelops and Hippodamia have many, many children. They are fucking all night long, right? The most notable of these children are the twins Atreus and Thyestes. However, Pelops also has a bastard son named Chrysippus, whom he sired from a nymph. I don't know the name of the nymph, but he's got a bastard kid. I'm going to talk about Chrysippus first because he only has 2 myths and he does not win in either of them. It's bad all over for Chrysippus. So Chrysippus is raised in Pelops' palace alongside his legitimate half-brothers, Atreus and Thyestes, and he is described as being very beautiful, which you know immediately means that he is not going to have an awesome life. When a male character in Greek mythology is described as being very beautiful, they are going to be raped by an older man, which is how it works back then. Before Chrysippus reaches manhood, so while he is still a child, probably like 12 to 14 years old, the exiled Theban prince Laius is welcomed to the court of Pelops, and he becomes Chrysippus's tutor. Laius, like the creep he is, falls in love with Chrysippus and devises a plan to capture him. Don't do that. So Laius claimed to Pelops that he would escort Chrysippus to the Nemean Games, which is the ancient equivalent of the Winter Olympics. Pelops is like, great, go take him. He needs to learn. Maybe he'll be able to perform in these games. Whatever. Just take him and expose him to the beauty of the Winter Olympics. So the two of them go, but instead of taking him to the Nemean Games, Laius kidnaps Chrysippus, takes him back to Thebes, where he's exiled from, by the way. You can't go back there, you're exiled. But he takes him back to Thebes and takes him as his little sex slave, I guess. Upon learning that Chrysippus has been kidnapped by his tutor, Pelops wages war against Laius and Thebes, and upon ransoming Chrysippus from them, Pelops curses Laius to be killed by his own son, and he was killed by his own son. You might know him, guys. His name is Oedipus. Oh yeah, guys, because remember, 3 Theban plays by Sophocles, starring Oedipus, who killed his father and murdered his mother. Everything is connected, yeah. Okay, just a little side tangent here, okay? There's a very rare version of the myth where the infant Oedipus is born at this point, the infant Oedipus, after being abandoned in the wilderness to die, is adopted not by the king and queen of Corinth, as depicted in the Theban plays by Sophocles. He is instead adopted by Pelops and Hippodamia, making Oedipus Chrysippus's adopted brother. So all of these guys are growing up in the same house, and vibes are not good. So because Oedipus in this version of the story is Chrysippus's adopted brother, when Chrysippus is abducted by Laius, Oedipus goes to take him back and he kills Laius, confirming the prophecy or whatever. And then there is yet another version of the story where Oedipus also desires Chrysippus. I think they're still adopted brothers in this version of the story. Anyways, Oedipus wants to fuck Chrysippus, and Laius wants to fuck Chrysippus, and then they battle it out for Chrysippus's affections. Regardless, Chrysippus dies not too long after being abducted by Laius in Thebes, and he dies because he is murdered by his half-brothers Atreus and Thyestes on Hippodamia's suggestion. Their mom is like, your dad obviously loves his bastard child more than he loves you, his trueborn eldest sons. You've got to get rid of that bitch so that he doesn't take the kingdom from you, okay? So because Chrysippus has been murdered by Atreus and Thyestes by the orders of Hippodamia, Pelops exiles his wife and 2 sons to Mycenae. Not only did he exile his 2 sons, but he also cursed Atreus and Thyestes that their descendants caused the others' descendants to perish. Like, their bloodlines are going to wipe each other out, basically. And this thereby compounds the previous curses into the anathema that is known as the curse of the Atreidii, which is from now on going to comprise of the rest of the family. So upon arriving in Mycenae, Hippodamia hangs herself. She's been exiled from her homeland, by the way. She was the princess of Pisa before Pelops even got there. She was exiled from her homeland. Anyways, so she hangs herself. Sorry, queen. And Atreus and Thyestes become trusted stewards of Eurystheus, who is the king of Mycenae. If you're exiled from a place, wouldn't people know, shouldn't they know, why you were exiled, therefore not to be trusted? I don't know. Anyways, so they become entrusted advisors, the stewards of Eurystheus. During an undetermined amount of time, I don't know when, I don't know how, Atreus marries a Cretan princess named Euripe, and they have 3 children, 2 sons, Agamemnon and Menelaus, and a daughter, Anaxibia. She never comes up again. I just want you to know this because there's another woman in the story, except she doesn't do anything. Thyestes does not marry, but he has 4 children with an unnamed naiad, 3 sons, Aglaeus, Orchomenus, and Calleus, and a daughter, Pelopeia. The 2 brothers, Atreus and Thyestes, are left in charge of the city when Eurystheus decides that he must destroy the Heraclidae, or the children of Heracles. That is a completely separate tangent that is super interesting. I don't have time to get into it. So, on their hunt for the Heraclidae, Eurystheus and his sons are killed in Athens, signaling the end of the Perseid dynasty and the beginning of the Atreid dynasty, because Eurystheus was descended from Perseus, you know, the guy who, like, beheaded Medusa, right? That guy. Wait, this doesn't really make any sense if I don't tell you the story. Or at least it's not making sense in my head. Here's the story. So the main reason that Eurystheus decides that he needs to destroy the Heraclidae is because Hera and Zeus, back in the way back, had a contest of wills over whose candidate would be the hero to defeat the remaining creatures that represented the old order of the Titans and bring in the reign of the 12 Olympians. They were like, we need a guy who's going to be our number 1 guy. Hera chose one guy to represent her, and Zeus chose another guy to represent him. So Hera chose Eurystheus as her champion, and Zeus chose his son Heracles, not Hercules. Hercules is the Roman name. Heracles is his Greek name. Both Heracles and Eurystheus are the grandsons of the hero Perseus, killed Medusa. I mean, not like, I'm doing this not as like a right on. I'm doing this as like, this is how he would hold her head, right? Because he decapitates her. Anyways. Now, Eurystheus is Perseus' grandson by blood, but Heracles is his grandson through his human stepfather, Amphitryon. Amphitryon? So he's not blood related to Heracles. It's a little bit like what the Roman emperors were doing. Most of them weren't related to each other at all, but they would adopt each other as their heirs. Like, okay, I'm going to adopt you. You are a 40-year-old man, and I'm going to adopt you as my son and heir. And we're not related at all, but we are going to be part of the same dynasty. Shortly before Heracles was born, Zeus declared that the next born descendant of Perseus would be the king of Mycenae. Now, Mycenae is a big deal. You want Mycenae. So because Mycenae is a big deal and Hera wants to win the bet with Zeus, she delays Heracles' birth and forces Eurystheus to be born prematurely. If things had gone naturally, Heracles would have been born, and then Eurystheus would have been born like 3 months later, because that's just kind of how like human gestation works, right? Now, the main sticking point against Heracles for Eurystheus is in regards to Heracles' 12 labors. You know the 12 labors? It's the 12 punishments that Heracles has to do because he murdered his wife and children. Eurystheus, as the king of Mycenae, chose the 12 labors that Heracles had to do, thinking that Heracles wouldn't be able to do them, and because he was afraid to complete them himself, because he knew he would not be able to complete them. If he tried, he would die. Heracles obviously did complete all 12 of the labors, completely humiliating Eurystheus, which is why Eurystheus decides that he must destroy the Heraclidae because at this point, Heracles is already dead, but he's got children everywhere. So, back to where I was. So, Eurystheus and his sons are killed in Athens by the Heraclidae. So, Heracles' bloodline continues, Eurystheus' ends. This signals the end of the Perseid dynasty in Mycenae and the beginning of the Atreid dynasty. Because again, all of Perseus' blood descendants are dead. Heracles was not related to him by blood. He was related to him by his stepfather. I am not the stepfather, I'm the father who stepped up, right? I'm sure you can figure out by the name of the dynasty that Atreus is the one who ascends to the throne of Mycenae, presumably because he's the older twin. Obviously, as there usually is with twin brothers and an empty throne, there is a power struggle, and it starts when Atreus vows to sacrifice his best lamb to the goddess Artemis. Do not promise these kinds of things. He goes to his flock and he's like, okay, which one's the best lamb? He discovers in his flock a golden sheep, golden lamb. It's gold. Arguably, this is the best lamb. However, instead of sacrificing it to Artemis, he decides to keep it for himself. So he gives the lamb to Euripedes to hide. I don't know where you're going to hide a sheep, but he hides the sheep. Presumably the sheep is still alive, and he didn't but he hides the sheep, or she hides the sheep. The problem with this is that Erope is having an affair with Thyestes. Whoops, she's having both brothers at once. Not at once, you know what I mean. Because Erope is having an affair with Thyestes, and she presumably likes Thyestes more than she likes her legal husband, she gives the lamb to Thyestes, and he then poses a challenge to Atreus. He's like, this is how I'm going to get the throne. The challenge is that whoever has the golden lamb should be king. Now, you're probably thinking, why the fuck would he bring this up? Because presumably, Atreus wouldn't tell anyone about the golden lamb. If you tell people that you have a golden lamb, people are automatically going to try and get the golden lamb from you. Because it's a golden fucking lamb. So, if we were playing a smart game here, Thyestes wouldn't even mention the golden lamb. He wouldn't even pose this challenge. He would just show up and be like, I have the golden lamb, and because I am owning this golden lamb, I should be king. He's being a fucking idiot. Anyways, he challenges his brother. Whoever has the golden lamb should be king. And Atreus, thinking that he is still in possession of the golden lamb, is like, oh my god, I'm gonna win this challenge. So yeah, obviously, I'm gonna agree to the challenge. But then, psych, Thyestes brings out the golden lamb, and he becomes king of Mycenae. So Atreus, who has been spurned out of his throne by his twin brother and his wife, prays to Zeus, asking him to claim the throne of Mycenae from his brother. He's like, please, Zeus, I want the throne. So Zeus sends Hermes to Atreus, advising him to propose another challenge to Thyestes. This second challenge is that if the sun rose in the west and set in the east, against the natural order of the universe, if you know how the universe works, the sun rises in the east and it sets in the west, then the throne of Mycenae should go to Atreus. That's basically the universe being like, hey, this is wrong. The fact that Thyestes is on the throne of Mycenae is wrong because it really should be Atreus. Thyestes agrees to this challenge because he's like, okay, I don't know a lot, but I know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and there's no fucking way that the sun is ever going to rise in the west and set in the east. That's fucking ridiculous. So he agrees to the challenge, but then Helios, who's the god of the sun, under Zeus's payroll, by the way, because remember, Zeus is on Atreus' side, Helios reverses the sun's cycle, which definitely can't be good for the world. The tides are reversed, everything's in whack, cycles are bad, it's bad. This can't be good. But Helios does it anyways because he is on Zeus's payroll. And by the rules of the challenge, Atreus is the divine right king of Mycenae. And to top it all off, the people of Mycenae bow to him as the true king because he was the one who managed to reverse the sun's course in the sky. So they're like, oh, you're obviously the guy that we should be following. The sun has always done the correct path except for today. And you made that happen. So yeah, we're gonna follow you, dude. And then it's at this point that Atreus discovers that his brother and his wife are having an affair with each other. So as revenge, Atreus does the fucked up thing, and he murders Thyestes' 3 sons. I don't know their names. I don't remember their names. It doesn't matter. He murders his 3 sons, chops them up, sets their hands and feet aside. So the rest of their body is all chopped up, right? Hands and feet are totally fine. And he cooks them into a meal that is then served to Thyestes. He does the Tantalus special, kills the boy and turns him into a stew, right? But now, instead of 1 son, it's 3 sons. So Thyestes, who is totally unaware that his sons are murdered and stewed, eats the entire meal. He's like, oh my god, brother, thank you so much for this delicious meal. Eats the meal. It isn't until after he eats his sons that Atreus reveals what he has done, that he has served Thyestes a cannibal feast, and then he taunts his brother. Atreus, just to rub it in a bit, salt in the wound style, Atreus taunts Thyestes by dancing around with his murdered nephew's hands and feet. He's just dancing, and he's presumably got something in his hand, and he's waving it around. He's like, you ate them, and I killed them, and whatever, you know? So because he ate human flesh, and because he ate the flesh of his sons, Thyestes is exiled from Mycenae. This is the second time he's been exiled from a place. So he's upset, he's distraught, he's in grief. Thyestes decides to go to the oracle. The oracle advises Thyestes that he needs to enact revenge upon his brother, obviously, and in order to do that, he must sire a son by his daughter, Pelopeia, and that son will kill Atreus. He has to do incest on top of doing cannibalism of your children. He also has to do incest. Okay, so Thyestes travels to the city of Sicyon, where Pelopeia was staying at the court of King Thespostus. And the story goes that Pelopeia was at the riverbank to wash her clothes because they had become stained with blood during a sacrificial rite to Athena. She works in the temple of Athena, right? Thyestes attacks and rapes her on the riverbank, but his face is covered, so he's got a mask on. Because his face is covered, she doesn't know who her rapist is. She doesn't know that it was her father who attacked and raped her. Her only hint of who he might be is the sword which she managed to take during the event. So he displaced his sword, or she grabbed it, or I don't know, but she has his sword. Soon after that happens, Atreus arrives in Sicyon in search of Thyestes because he got a tip that Thyestes would be in Sicyon. And instead he finds Pelopeia, who he assumed was Thesprotus' daughter, because he doesn't know his own niece. Apparently she's been gone for years and he doesn't know his own niece. Atreus asks Thesprotus for her hand in marriage, unaware that she's his niece, unaware that she is not Thesprotus' daughter. Thesprotus accepts. He's like, yeah, sure, you can marry her, even though he knows that she's not his daughter, but he isn't paid enough to deal with this right now. So it's unclear whether they marry or not. I'm gonna assume they do get married, but I do know for a fact that Atreus takes Pelopeia back to Mycenae, where she gives birth to her brother's son, Aegisthus. When Aegisthus is born, Pelopeia abandons him in the woods, which is what people tend to do in this time. They like to abandon their sons in the woods. But she abandons him in the woods for a good reason, because she's ashamed of how he was conceived. That makes sense. There is no abortion. I mean, there's abortion, but there's no safe abortion in this time. Rather than dying of exposure, as most infants are wont to do, because he has a prophecy laying over his head, the infant Aegisthus is found by a shepherd and then brought to Atreus as an anonymous child. So the shepherd is like, hey, king, I found a baby in the woods. Do you want him? Because are there orphanages at this time? When did orphanages start? I feel like it's a very Victorian thing. Anyways, Atreus, because he's good of heart or whatever, decides to raise Aegisthus as his own alongside his other sons by Eurype, Agamemnon, and Menelaus. Someone slammed the door, and it shook the whole house. Jesus fucking Christ, guys. So he's raised in the palace with Agamemnon and Menelaus. Once he reaches adulthood, Agamemnon and Menelaus discover their uncle Thyestes hiding in Delphi. So they forcibly return him to Mycenae to be executed because apparently, even though he was exiled, Atreus has been looking for him, trying to kill him because he's like, you should die. Atreus sends his adopted son Aegisthus to kill Thyestes, but when Aegisthus unsheaths his sword to do the killing, Thyestes recognizes it as the sword Penelope took from him when he was raping her all those years ago. He recognizes it as his sword. He's like, oh my god, why do you have my sword, dude? Thyestes asks Aegisthus how he got that sword, and Aegisthus tells him that his adopted mother, Penelope, gave the sword to him. And then they're like, okay, well, we gotta talk to Penelope. Then Penelope comes, and Penelope explains how she got the sword. And it's at this point that Penelope puts two and two together and realizes that it was her father who raped her on the riverbank. And that's also the same time that she realizes that Aegisthus is the baby that she gave away. And thus, she has been raising accidentally her brother's son this entire time, even though she intended to not have him anymore. So she takes the sword from Aegisthus' hands and she kills herself with it. I'm sorry, Penelope. I don't mean to laugh. So Thyestes tells Aegisthus the entire history of their family, presumably over Penelope's dead body. He's like, here's the situation, let me catch you up on everything. Now, knowing the full story and the fact that Thyestes is both Aegisthus' father and grandfather, Aegisthus makes the executive decision to murder Atreus per the prophecy that Thyestes received from the oracle. Once Atreus is out of the way, Aegisthus and Thyestes, father and son, take control of Mycenae and jointly rule. As we know from Roman history, joint rulers are never a good idea. Are there other cultures who do joint rulers and then it works perfectly fine? And I'm not talking about like a king and his wife, the queen. I'm talking about like two brothers, a father and a son. Because their father has been #murdered by their uncle and their brother cousin? I think he would be a brother cousin. Anyways, because Atreus is dead, Agamemnon and Menelaus have to flee to Sparta. They are taking refuge in the court of King Tyndareus. Now, Tyndareus is married to a woman named Leda, and the two of them have many children together. They're going at it day and night. But there are 4 children that are important here. They're very interesting because while Leda was pregnant with Tyndareus' children, she catches the attention of Zeus. It's not super hard to catch the attention of Zeus. He is a whore. Zeus decides that he has to have her. He has to fuck her. So, in the guise of a swan, Zeus seduces Leda. And by the way, you know how I said earlier that the ancient Greeks were kind of pro-pedophilia but anti-incest? Yeah, well, they're also kind of pro-bestiality in like a weird, like, roundabout way. Yeah, the amount of times women are raped by animals, either disguised gods, disguised as animals, or just animals, kind of too much. When Leda gives birth after being seduced by the Zeus swan, she gives birth to 2 sets of twins in eggs, swan style, bird style. You know how birds are laying eggs? Yeah, she lays 2 eggs, and in those 2 eggs are a set of twins each, right? So in one egg, you have Castor and Pollux. No, maybe it's not. Anyways, the 4 children that are born from these eggs are Castor and Pollux and Helen and Clytemnestra. Pollux and Helen are the children of Zeus. Presumably they were in one egg. And Castor and Clytemnestra are the children of Tyndareus. Presumably they were in another egg. This raises a lot of questions to me. First of all, Leda was already pregnant when Zeus swan seduced her. So why were the mortal children, Castor and Clytemnestra, born an egg? When did the egg part happen? How far into the pregnancy was she that they were able to be born an egg? Secondly, dude, okay, I'm picturing twins, right? And I'm picturing how the body distends itself to carry twins. Huge. Now double that, quadruplets. huge. And then on top of that, egg? She has to lay egg? On top of giving birth, she has to lay egg? Girl. But we have two half divine children, Pollux and Helen. Then we have two fully mortal children, Castor and Clytemnestra. Castor and Pollux do not matter at all. They are not going to matter. They don't contribute to the story at all, but Helen and Clytemnestra play huge roles. You probably know Helen. She was considered to be the most beautiful woman in the world. She was the face that launched 1,000 ships, blah, 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 whatever. When she was old enough to marry, which was probably like 12, I don't know how old, many Greek kings, princes, warriors, whatever, they all came to Sparta seeking her hand in marriage. Some of these suitors include Odysseus, Ajax the Great, Diomedes, Idomeneus, Patroclus, and both Menelaus and Agamemnon, who are in Sparta as refugees. Tyndareus, however, because he's a little fucking pussy, little bitch, neither accepts nor rejects any of the suitors because he's afraid of offending them. So they're all kind of just in Sparta in this weird limbo. They want to marry her, but Tyndareus isn't giving her hand away to anyone, but he's also not telling them to leave. So they're kind of just there. Anyways, wily Odysseus offers Tyndareus a solution in exchange for Tyndareus' support in his courting of Penelope, who is Tyndareus' niece, right? He's like, here's how you can marry Helen off without offending anyone, and in exchange, I would like your niece. I don't think Odysseus was ever there for Helen. I think he wanted Penelope. Odysseus proposes that before the decision is made, all of the suitors must swear an oath that they will defend Helen's chosen husband against any enemy. They will not attack him in any way in retaliation, join enemy sides against her husband. If her husband goes off to war, they have to be on his side. If he calls his bannermen to war, they are part of his bannermen, if that makes sense to you. It makes sense to me if that makes sense to you. Once all of the suitors swear this oath, Menelaus is chosen to be Helen's husband on the grounds that he was the wealthiest. Not super sure how he obtained his wealth, given that he had fled Mycenae as a refuge because his uncle and brother cousin stole the throne. Not super sure how he obtained this wealth, but they're saying that he's the wealthiest, so that's what we're going to go with. It also might be at this point in the timeline that Agamemnon and Menelaus have regained power over Mycenae, but it's super unclear. I'm not super sure when that happens. I just know that it does happen at some point. The two marry. Menelaus and Helen get married, and their marriage, according to Hesiod, their marriage marks the beginning of the end for the age of heroes. Zeus plans on obliterating all of the heroes, all of the demigods, all of these great warriors that we have all of these myths about, and the Trojan War is his means to an end. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, well, what about Agamemnon? Like, what's going to happen to him? Well, he marries Tyndareus' other daughter, his mortal daughter, Clytemnestra, who in some stories was already married to Agamemnon's cousin, Tantalus. That's right, maybe Agamemnon and Menelaus had a cousin named Tantalus, named after their great-grandfather who cooked sun into stew. How are these two maybe related? Well, there are some options. The first option is that Tantalus is yet another illegitimate son of Thyestes by Euripedes that managed to escape butchering and cooking of Thyestes' other sons, the second murdering and cooking that occurs in this story. So that's the first option. The second option is that Tantalus is the son of Brodius, who is the son of the original Tantalus, which would make the second Tantalus Agamemnon's first cousin once removed. In these versions of the story, Clytemnestra is already married to Tantalus, and Agamemnon, because he wants to marry her, slays both Tantalus and the couple's newborn child so that he can have her. Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, as king and queen of Mycenae, have 4 children, 3 daughters, Iphigenia, Elektra, and Chrysothemis. Chrysothemis is not important in the story at all, but I do have to mention her. And they have 1 son, Orestes. I don't know the birth order of these children, except for that Iphigenia is the oldest. Just remember that, okay? Helen and Menelaus, who become the king and queen of Sparta after Tyndareus' death, only have 1 daughter, Hermione. So some years later, after the marriage of Helen and Menelaus, Paris, who is a prince of the city of Troy, which is located on the opposite side of the Aegean. So this is mainland Greece, and then this is Troy in like Turkey. He is welcomed to the house of Menelaus as a guest, but prior to arriving in Sparta, Paris goes through a series of interesting events, predicaments, if you will. On Mount Olympus, the gods are celebrating the marriage between Peleus, who is a mortal king of Phthia, and the goddess Thetis. Now, this marriage between Peleus and Thetis is one of the precipitating events of the Trojan War. Their union was orchestrated by Zeus because he had received a prophecy that Thetis' son would become greater than his father. This is a problem because Zeus wanted to fuck Thetis. But if she sired a son by him, he was worried that that son would overthrow him. So Zeus has Thetis married to a mortal man so that their son, Achilles, would be unable to overthrow the Olympian gods. He could be better than his mortal father, but there's no way in hell he would be able to overthrow the gods. Also, this kind of fucks up my timeline in the story because it's like right before Paris arrives in Sparta. It's right before, spoiler alert, Paris kidnaps Helen. And it's at this point in the timeline that Achilles is just born. But also, like, I don't know how prior to Paris going to Sparta this wedding thing is, but the timeline is kind of fucked up, and I don't know how old Achilles actually is now. Like, I don't really know how old he is during the Trojan War. I'm gonna assume earliest 22. 22 seems right. How old is Patroclus? Because they're fucking and sucking. Like, they're gay. Like, not in, like, the pedophilia way. I mean, like, I'm sure that was a part of it. Because Patroclus is older. Like, canonically older. Like, Patroclus was vying for Helen's hand, although I don't really know how old he was then. He could have been 5. The gods are celebrating this marriage between Peleus and Thetis, and every single god is invited to the party except for Eris, the goddess of strife. As revenge for not being invited to the party, Eris crafts the golden apple of discord. Not Discord the app, I mean discord as in division, as in jealousy. And on the golden apple of discord is inscribed the phrase, the message, whatever, for the most beautiful. She has this apple, she throws it into the party, causing all of the goddesses to fight. This especially causes problems between Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, who were the 3 goddesses considered to be the most beautiful. They asked Zeus to settle the matter. Because Zeus is a bitch, he does not settle the matter himself, but he instead appoints Paris, who is a mortal prince, by the way, as the deciding vote. So the 3 goddesses go down to Earth, meet Paris, and when he says that he cannot choose, they try bribing him in order to get his favor. So Hera promises him ownership over all Europe and Asia. That's not something you can give, but whatever. Athena promises him skill in battle and the wisdom and abilities of the greatest warriors. And then Aphrodite promises him the love of the most beautiful woman on Earth, Helen. So Paris chooses Aphrodite because he wants a woman. So there are some sources that depict Helen as being abducted by Paris. She didn't want to go to Troy. She didn't want to leave her husband. Most ancient Greek sources, following the example of the Iliad, however, depicts Helen as having fallen in love with Paris while he was in Sparta as a guest. And she is depicted as going to Troy willingly. Even if she is remorseful of her actions and regardless of what power fate and divine will have over human actions, Troy still would have been razed to the ground. Heroes would have gone to Troy to destroy it for the offense that they had caused. Even if she did go back, they would still go to Troy because they had offended their guy. So while Menelaus in the Iliad is the cuckolded husband, Agamemnon is the chief commander of the Achaean forces, of the Greek forces. He's the number 1 guy. You have an entire army of well-respected kings and princes and heroes and soldiers, and Agamemnon is the top dog. He is on the top of the food chain. He is the most powerful king in Greece because remember, Mycenae is kind of hot shit. Not only is Mycenae hot shit, but he's also proven himself to be a powerful ally, powerful warrior, powerful leader, because he has extended his dominion beyond Mycenae through conquest. So he's taken other cities by force. He's proven that he's a good fighter and he's someone worth following. And this is also why he is often referred to as the king of Argos, because Mycenae is like just a city. Argos is a region. Kind of a region? Close enough. Anyway, so the full Greek army, they convene at the port city of Aulis. They're like, okay, everybody, we're going to war. But before we go to war, we all have to meet here to get our numbers ready, right? We have to take stock of who's here. While in Aulis, waiting for the troops to arrive, Agamemnon kills a deer in a grove that was sacred to Artemis. Artemis is once again offended. She's very easy to anger. So, in revenge, Artemis stops the winds completely. And this is a problem because the Greeks cannot set sail for Troy. They could row their boats, but that's going to cost them all of their strength, all of their energy. They need that energy to fight. And if they're using all of that energy to row their boats over to Troy across the Aegean, they're basically going to be sitting ducks by the time they get to Troy. They need the winds in their sails to propel them forward. Several weeks pass, the winds do not move. The army is getting restless. They're like, what are we going to do? Like, how are we going to get to Troy? We can't row the fucking boats. We need the winds. The seer Calchas tells Agamemnon that the reason the winds have stopped is because Artemis is mad at him, and the only way he will be able to get back into her good graces is if he sacrifices his eldest child and daughter, Iphigenia. Despite the distress this information causes, Agamemnon summons his wife and daughter to Aulis under the pretense that she will be married to Achilles. Again, how old is Achilles? It's not until Iphigenia reaches the altar that mother and daughter realize the purpose of their summons. But at this point, it's too late. Iphigenia's not there to get married, she's there to be sacrificed. Agamemnon kills her himself, sacrificing his daughter to Artemis, and the Greeks are finally able to set sail to Troy. The Greeks spend 10 years in Troy. As I've mentioned before, the Iliad only depicts the tail end of the war, the 10th year, from Achilles' refusal to continue fighting after Agamemnon dishonors him by taking away his war prize, the woman Briseis, war prize. He captured her. He plundered her village and killed her family and then took her as a slave. But it depicts that event at the very beginning of the Iliad to the death of Hector, who is the Prince of Troy. Paris is a Prince of Troy. Hector is the Prince of Troy. He's the guy. Troy falls, Achilles kills Hector, Achilles dies, gains eternal glory, and then the Greeks craft the Trojan horse. Presumably, the Trojan horse is left at the gates of Troy as a gift from the gods to be like, congratulations on your win. And yeah, that is how the Greeks get into the city of Troy, and that's how they sack the city, and that's how they win the Trojan War. Okay, and now we get into my favorite part of the video, the whole point I wanted to make this video. We are going to talk about the Oresteia, a trilogy of Greek tragedies written by the ancient Greek tragedian Aeschylus about the house of Atreus and its demise. The trilogy, as written by Aeschylus, is made up of the plays Agamemnon, Libation Bearers, and Eumenides. I'm going to be going into detail about what happens in all of these plays, whether or not I'm doing any analyzing, who fucking knows. The script as I have it right now, I'm just recapping all of the plays to you. So we begin with Agamemnon. There is a night watch standing on the roof of Agamemnon's house, tasked by Clytemnestra to watch and wait for some kind of signal that Troy has fallen. But then suddenly a light appears in the distance, a beacon of sorts reaches Mycenae, and the watchman rejoices because this is a sign that he has been waiting for. He has been waiting for 10 years, and he's finally gotten it. He runs into the house and he tells Clytemnestra the good news. The chorus comes in. They are a group of old men of Argos, and they're here to recap the crux of the Trojan War, why the lord of the house has been gone for 10 years, but they also recount how Agamemnon, when sailing for Troy, sacrificed his daughter Iphigenia to the goddess Artemis. She wants to instigate another sacrifice, a lawless, joyless, strife-planning sacrifice that will turn a wife against a husband. For there lives in this house a certain form of anger, a dread devising, ever-occurring, ever-remembering anger that longs to exact vengeance for a child. Clytemnestra enters the scene, and she has ordered that sacrifices be made on the altars of the gods in thanks for the good news. When the chorus question her how she knows Troy has fallen, how she knows this is good news, Clytemnestra tells them that the beacons were lit amongst their allies, racing across the Aegean from Troy to Mycenae the second Troy fell. Think of how in like Return of the King, before Rohan goes to Gondor to aid Gondor in its fight against darkness and evil, right? How there's that like incredible scene of the beacons on like the mountaintops or whatever. They're all like giant bonfires or whatever being lit, and then the bonfires are just, it's creating this message and this wave across like the entirety of Middle Earth or whatever, until it finally reaches Rohan, and then Aragorn sees it, and then he runs into the hall and he's like, Gondor is calling for our aid. You know that scene? It's basically that scene. So think of that scene when I'm telling you this, right? She tells of how the Greek forces are plundering the city, how they are taking rest in Trojan beds, but then she says something strange. Something with a double meaning. Something the chorus doesn't notice. Let no mad impulse strike the army to ravish what they should not, overcome by greed. They're not home yet. Yet even if they make it home without offending gods, the agony of those who died may wake again. I pray no sudden shift to evil. So long as men do not let their hubris get in the way, all will be well. The chorus rejoices, thanking the gods over their victory over Troy. They especially thank Zeus, dispensing justice upon the perpetrators of the war, for punishing Paris for stealing a woman away from her husband, punishing the city of Troy for harboring an adulterer, and punishing Helen for abandoning her husband and child, causing ruin across Greece. This is the end of the age of heroes. They don't know that, I know that, and you know that. This is called dramatic irony here. A herald suddenly arrives and immediately expresses his relief at returning to Argos after being away for 10 years. He was part of Agamemnon's army. They have returned from Troy. I don't know how long it's been. We are compressing time in an insane and manic way. The herald greets the chorus and confirms what Clytemnestra claimed. Then Clytemnestra comes in and sends the herald back to Agamemnon with a message that he must return to his house swiftly, that his wife, who has remained faithful to him all these 10 years, these long 10 years, his wife is yearning for him, waiting for him to come home, to return to her. She then leaves the scene, but before the herald can return to Agamemnon, the chorus asks for news of Menelaus. They left to go get Menelaus' wife. What happened to him? The herald reports that a great storm swept through the Greek fleet on their way back from Troy, and Menelaus' ship was one of the many that went missing. He's alive, by the way. He's fine. He makes it back. Perfectly fine. Everything's fine. Don't worry, but this is just some drama for you. And the chorus curse Helen for the grief and destruction that she has caused, that her beauty has caused. They also reflect on the idea that it is only virtuous families that suffer despite their goodness, when in fact the opposite is true. Look at the house of Atreus. It's not a good family at all, despite their appearance. They are polluted and destroyed and cursed, and because of that, grief upon grief upon grief is laid upon them. Agamemnon arrives riding in a chariot with the Trojan princess and priestess Cassandra, whom he has taken as his war prize and slave. The chorus rejoices, hailing him for his victory over Troy, renouncing their previous doubt in his decision to make war on Ilium. They thought that going to war over a woman who willingly abandoned her husband was fruitless, but now they realize, oh, this was the correct choice. Agamemnon praises the gods for granting him victory over Troy, for dispensing justice. Clytemnestra enters the scene, greets her husband, and declares her passionate love for him, how tormented she was as a wife forced to sit and wait at home while her husband waged war, how lonely it was, how difficult it was to be away from him for 10 years. You know, she would hear new rumors about how he had died, and she was so fearful of the growing discontent in the city in Mycenae that she sent their young son Orestes away toward another city, because she was worried that while Agamemnon was away, people would try and kill Orestes, who was his heir. Agamemnon, like a bitch, is immediately dismissive of Clytemnestra, uncaring of the long speech that she just gave to him, showcasing her devotion and gratitude to the gods. Clytemnestra, you know, this is a bitch for bitch relationship here, okay? They can match each other's energy. Clytemnestra orders her women to spread purple silks and velvets across the ground, from Agamemnon's chariot all the way to the entrance of the palace. Agamemnon rebukes his wife for this display, stating that if he were to walk on the fabrics, it would be an unseemly display of pride and hubris. It would be as if he were impersonating a god, and that would surely incur their wrath. Hey, I just thanked the gods for everything that they've done for letting me defeat Troy. I'm not going to offend them like this. But Clytemnestra is smarter than him. She goads him into walking on the fabrics, sneering at his fear of being judged by mortal men. There are no gods here. There are only mortal men. And she points out that if Priam, the king of Troy, had been victorious in the war, and not him, Priam would not have hesitated to walk on the purple. He would not have hesitated because Priam would know these are all mortal men. They don't have any power over you. Poking the bear where it hurts, intentionally provoking him into walking on the fabrics by invoking his enemy, implying that he's a coward for refusing to do what Priam would have done. A dead man, by the way. Agamemnon enters the palace, walking on the fabrics, but not before requesting that Cassandra be treated with kindness, with proper care and attention. She is his war prize, she is his slave, but she's also his bedmate. He goes into the palace, and Clytemnestra follows him in. Still outside of the palace, the chorus sense a foreboding, dread darkness on the horizon, which is odd since Agamemnon has returned in victory and order has been restored to the city. Everything should be great. Clytemnestra reappears and orders Cassandra to participate in giving the sacrifices to the gods and to give thanks that, although she is now a slave, she will have kind masters who will treat her well. Cassandra does not respond. Perhaps she just doesn't know the language. She doesn't know what Clytemnestra is saying. She's never left Troy before, so that would make sense. Clytemnestra enters the palace once again, and Cassandra is still left alone, still standing in the chariot with the chorus. They express immense pity for her until Cassandra suddenly wails, crying out for the god Apollo, begging him to tell her why he torments her so, because long ago Apollo fell in love with Cassandra, and she promised to bear him a child if he gave her the gift of prophecy. Why you would want the gift of prophecy, I don't know. He did give her the gift of prophecy, but she went back on her word. She refused to give him a child. So he punishes her by making it so that no one ever believes her. Her prophecies will always fall on deaf ears. No one will ever believe her, and they will never understand her. From her gift, she can see the rot that plagues the house of Atreus, the infection that pollutes the bloodline. She knows what crimes have been committed here. She knows what crimes have yet to unfold. She knows the stain that this family has made on itself and on each other. And although the chorus doesn't understand her, she declares that destruction will soon fall upon the house. Destruction is imminent. Agamemnon will die at the hands of a woman, and the son will emerge from exile to avenge his father's death. That is the tragedy that she foresees happening. She compares the house of Atreus to Troy itself, two entities destined for destruction. The gods have willed that these great houses, these great powers, be destroyed. Just as Troy paid the price for harboring Helen, so too will Agamemnon pay the price for destroying Troy. It's a domino effect, right? No matter even if justice is being dispensed and you're doing the perceived good thing, bad karma is going to follow you. Cassandra declares that she has resigned herself to her fate, to death, because her city has fallen, her family is dead, and it is her time to join them. There's no reason why she is still alive, and they are all gone. The chorus, still pitying her, still not understanding her, still failing to comprehend what she's told them, praises her for her bravery, mistaking it as bravery to endure, not bravery to meet death face to face. Cassandra approaches the palace but instantly recoils. But still she enters and she says one last prayer to Apollo before disappearing forever. The chorus still does not understand the prophecy that Cassandra gave them, but they fear for Agamemnon nonetheless because of the foreboding darkness they can sense approaching. They don't know what that darkness is, despite Cassandra spelling it out to them, but they know something's coming. Suddenly, from inside the palace, Agamemnon lets out a shriek of agony, crying out that he's been mortally wounded. A second shriek is heard, and then silence, and the chorus doesn't know what to do. Some of them advocate for sending messengers to rally the citizens, while others insist that they should enter the palace themselves and confront the murderers, while others say that they shouldn't do anything. The doors are flung open, and Clytemnestra is revealed standing over the bodies of Agamemnon and Cassandra. They are both dead, and she is triumphant, and she is utterly shameless, as she describes to the horrified chorus how she lured Agamemnon into a false sense of security. She drew him a bath, she cared for him, she pampered him, and then she entrapped him in his bath by wrapping heavy ropes around him before killing him with an axe, which she swung herself. She killed him herself. The chorus are in shock and disbelief that she would do this, not only because she is a woman, but because she was Agamemnon's wife. It's unheard of that a wife would murder her husband so gruesomely, so shamelessly. They declare that she will be driven out of Argos for what she's done, that the people will not stand for this. She retorts that her actions were justified. Her husband deserved to die because he was evil, and that the chorus in defending him are hypocrites because none of them protested when Agamemnon killed Iphigenia. They welcomed him back to the city with open arms as if he had not murdered their innocent daughter. So Clytemnestra insists that her murdering Agamemnon is justified, that she did it to avenge Iphigenia's unjustified and undignified death, and she praises the gods that justice has been delivered. The chorus wails for Agamemnon. They cannot see reason. They do not take Clytemnestra's side. They think she's a mad woman. They lament over his murder, blaming his death on Helen. Why are we bringing her back into this? Fuck you guys. If he had not gone to Troy, this would not have happened. He would not have had to murder, sacrifice Iphigenia. Then they wonder who will mourn Agamemnon, since his wife, his closest relation, they're bound together in matrimony, legally, spiritually, whatever you have. She's his closest relation, and she's the one who murdered him. So who the fuck will mourn him now? Who will offer him libations at his grave? The chorus bemoans the curse that has thoroughly infected the royal family. But Clytemnestra insists. She insists that in murdering Agamemnon, the head of the family, she has ended the cycle of vengeance and violence because he can do no more harm. Like, I've ended this curse, I've ended this bloodline, I've fixed it, because the murder of Iphigenia was the last terrible thing this family will ever do. Because he was the perpetrator, he was the one that swung the sword and killed her, and now he is dead. And I'm not related to them, I'm not related by blood, so because I'm not related by blood, and because I killed him, the curse is over. That's not how it works, girlfriend. In this declaration, Clytemnestra also seals her own fate, because this arrogant declaration, her choice to take justice into her own hands, makes her guilty of the same deadly hubris that plagued Agamemnon, that of excessive pride. She thinks she solved everything, she only made it worse. And this pride that she has, this belief that she's above everything, that she is protected from mortal and divine law, will be what kills her in the end. Then out of the palace comes Aegisthus, the son of Thyestes and his daughter Pelopeia, Agamemnon's cousin. Aegisthus rejoices in his cousin's murder, and we learn that Aegisthus and Clytemnestra orchestrated the murder together. In fact, not only are they co-conspirators, but they're also lovers. The chorus abhors Aegisthus, and they taunt him as a lesser man for allowing a woman to strike the killing blow on his behalf. They threaten him with execution, he threatens them with death. Clytemnestra, the mastermind of the situation, prevents them from coming to blows, declaring that peace must now reign in Argos under her rule. Despite the horrible things she's done, she is their ruler. But they warn Clytemnestra that justice will come down upon her because Agamemnon still has a living son. Agamemnon's living son will return to Argos to avenge his father. Aegisthus and Clytemnestra, in their pride, disregard this warning, deeming them as empty threats, and they enter the palace once again. So this play opens 7 years after the events of Agamemnon, and Orestes has finally returned from his long exile, accompanied by his friend Pylades. The two of them visit the grave of Agamemnon, and Orestes says an invocation to Chthonic Hermes, or Hermes who travels to and from the underworld. The prefix chthonic just references, hey, you can go in between the living and the dead. Orestes then offers a lock of his hair to Inachus, the river god of Argos, before cutting off a second lock of hair to lay at his father's tomb as both an offering and a token of grief. First time he's ever been able to grieve his father at his grave. He was just returned. Just as Orestes lays down the offering, he sees a group of black-robed women approaching the tomb, and he wonders if some new sorrow has graced the house of Atreus. These women are the chorus and among them is Elektra, Orestes' sister. Orestes and Pylades hide as the women approach, and they are there because the night before, Clytemnestra had had a dream, one that her court diviners interpreted as being sent from her dead husband, who raged against his murderer. Fearful of the dream, Clytemnestra sent the slave women and Elektra to Agamemnon's tomb with libations in the hope that the offerings would appease his spirit. The women, however, are fearful that the dream is a portent of further death and destruction and misery upon the house. At this point, redemption is not a possibility when a house spills blood. The only way that you can cleanse a house of its sins is by eradicating the house entirely. It's what happens in the Theban plays, right? Like Oedipus murders his father, marries his mother, has children by her. The only way to appease those sins is if everyone dies, except for Ismene. Ismene lives. As slaves, the women can do nothing but obey Clytemnestra's commands, but they weep for what is to come. They know that something terrible is going to happen. They can feel it. Everyone knows that blood unjustly spilled does not seep into the ground. Instead, it clots and infects the minds of the guilty. Elektra speaks, and it is clear that despite the years that have passed, she is still in the throes of grief. Not only that, but she's also stuck in a liminal space where, as her father's daughter, she knows that the only way her father's spirit will be able to rest is if his murder is avenged. But as an unmarried woman of a higher social standing, she has no choice but to continue living in the house of her father's murderers. She cannot make any moves against them because they see all. They control her life. They control the house that she lives in. If she makes a wrong move, then she can be exiled. And then what is she going to do? The leader of the chorus tells Elektra that she cannot speak to Agamemnon on behalf of Clytemnestra, that she must say a blessing to all those who love her, for all those who stand beside her in her hatred for Clytemnestra and against this. However, Elektra resists because she views herself as being completely alone in the world. She doesn't think she has anyone left on her side. The slave women don't count because they're of a lower standing than her. They're more defenseless than her. They can't do anything. So she has no allies in the house. So the chorus suggests that if she cannot pray for those who love her, then she should pray to the gods that justice is brought down upon Clytemnestra and Aegisthus. If you cannot pray for allies to come to you, pray to the gods, which is seen as a last resort. Elektra wonders if revenge is a righteous thing to ask of the gods, and the chorus responds, how could it be unrighteous to pay evil with evil? So Elektra prays. She prays to Hermes, to the spirits of the underworld, to the earth itself, and she prays that Orestes will return to her, that he will return from his exile to avenge their father and save her from her fate, from being murdered in that house as well. She is the daughter of a king, and she has been reduced to a slave by her mother and her mother's allies, Elektra's enemies, and she prays that justice strikes down her enemies. Now, the chorus then joins in the libations. They wail, they sing, they pray to Agamemnon that he protect Elektra, that he send some man to deliver the house from evil, someone born to wield his sword. This suffocating grief has hovered over the house for years, not even hovered, but choked the house. And it seems as though it will linger for years to come until Elektra spies a lock of hair placed on her father's grave. It is the hair that Orestes left at the beginning of the play, and Elektra recognizes it as his hair because it is identical to her own, and she assumes that he had a lock of hair delivered to the tomb of their father in his absence. She doesn't believe that he's actually in Argos. She believes that he sent a messenger, put a lock of his hair onto their father's tomb. The chorus makes things worse because they believe the lock of hair is a sign that Orestes will never come home. Elektra is torn by her fear that Orestes is in fact dead until she spots a set of footprints on the ground that belong to neither her or the chorus women. Who else would come to her father's grave if not her? She recognizes these footprints as being Orestes as well because they match her footprints. Because they have the same shoe size, I guess. She recognizes both the footprints and the lock of hair as being Orestes because intrinsically they are her own as well. Orestes and Elektra are presented as being two sides of the same coin or one soul in two different bodies. At this revelation, Orestes reveals himself from his hiding place and declares that Elektra's prayers have been answered. Her brother has returned to Argos. Elektra, however, doesn't believe him. She's still fearful that he's dead. She's fearful that this is an imposter. Despite appropriately deducing her brother's identity, now that he's standing right in front of her, she can't believe it. She's unable to follow through on her own logic. The complete opposite of Clytemnestra, who has been depicted as being relentless and shrewd and calculating in her mastery of logic and language, especially towards her own ends. Elektra is doubtful of her skills of deduction. Clytemnestra believes in it fully. Elektra thinks that he is a trick, that he's mocking her in her grief and her hope, and Orestes tells her to take the lock of hair she found at the tomb and hold it up to his head, to see that the hair in her hand is the same as the hair on his head. And then when that doesn't work, he takes out a piece of weaving from his pocket that Elektra had made herself, that he had kept all those years, a token of her love for him. With the proof that he is in fact Orestes, Elektra rejoices and thanks the gods, and then she implores Orestes, please, practically begging him to save their house. There's no one else who can do it. She says that he is the only one who can save their house because she is the only one whom she loves. All her love that once belonged to her father, her mother, and her sister Iphigenia, it now all belongs to Orestes. So Orestes, the faithful younger brother, takes her up on her wish. He prays to Zeus that the god will watch over them as two children who have been unjustly exiled from their home, and reasoning that their father Agamemnon always made good sacrifices to the gods. If his bloodline ends, who will be left to pay the gods homage? Who will pray to the gods if the house of Atreus withers away? No one will do that. It is in Zeus's best interest to keep them safe. Then Orestes tells Elektra and the chorus women of how the god Apollo spoke to him and bade him to hunt down Agamemnon's murderers, lest he suffer immense pain by the unappeased dead. It's basically, if you don't avenge your father's death, his spirit will haunt you forever. It is the law of the gods that one must avenge their kin if the blood has been wrongly spilled. And if one were to fail in this mission, the dead would be plaguing the living. The Furies would pursue him and torture him to insanity until he himself died. They would essentially bear the mark of Cain, the yellow slip, 24601 style. You know what I mean? Although Orestes believed Apollo's word, he declared that he would have avenged his father's death no matter what because he grieved his father, and he despised the poverty he experienced as an exiled prince, as a man without a house. Elektra and the chorus join Orestes in his prayers to the gods to Agamemnon, and they whip themselves into a dizzying frenzy of grief, anger, pity. They wish Agamemnon had instead died a glorious death in Troy. It would be more dignified if he had died in Troy. They wish that somehow Clytemnestra had been slain before Agamemnon returned to Argos. They wish a lot of things, but most of all, they wish that this course of action was not necessary because they know the history of their house and they know that bloodletting and murder and revenge, in accordance with ancient laws, is embedded in the foundations of their house. It is how they got to this point. It is a necessary evil. Evil begets evil. They're not going to heal anything by doing this, but they will avenge their father. They recognize that Orestes is justified in murdering his mother, but he will not be exempt from punishment. There's no guarantee that the gods will protect him. In fact, by their own laws, they cannot protect him, even if it was a god that set him on this path. It's at this point that the chorus reveals the dream that Clytemnestra had that sent them to Agamemnon's tomb. She dreamt that she gave birth to a snake, wrapping it up as if it were a baby. However, when she tried to feed the creature from her breast, and the blood that was drawn from the split wound curdled the milk. It was a prophecy of her coming demise, that Orestes, the snake whom she bore from violent means, would lead to her violent demise. With this information, Orestes lays out the plan. He instructs Elektra to return to the house, keeping quiet of their secret and pretending to remain unaware of his return. Meanwhile, Orestes will approach the gate as a stranger, and his presence will surely draw the attention of the people, because why is a stranger standing at the gates, unannounced and unwelcomed by the lord of the house, Aegisthus? Their plan revolves around Aegisthus not being readily available and arrogant enough to forget the ancient laws of hospitality. While Orestes, Elektra, and Pylades are getting into position, the chorus laments the horrors that occur when a woman, especially a noble woman, seeks to rise above her station. The chorus instill in the audience the pervasive fear of the power women wield in the home. The home is their domain, and when they have power in this domain, they can allow their passions and their emotions to get the better of them, and that will ultimately cause the destruction of a house. That's their argument here. The chorus was so eager in their encouragement of the children's murder plot because they view Clytemnestra as the ultimate symbol of what is wrong and out of place in the world. Her strength and cunning used in opposition to a man makes her an anomaly, and they cannot comprehend that, and they do not want to comprehend it. Orestes is pounding at the door, demanding that he be announced to the masters of the house because he comes bearing news. Clytemnestra emerges from the house and graciously welcomes Orestes and Pylades into her home. She asks where they hail from, and Orestes lies, saying that they come from Delphi. They bring terrible news. While on his way to Argos, he came across a stranger named Strophios who told him to bring news to the house of Atreus that its heir, Orestes, has been killed. Clytemnestra wails at the news, lamenting that the curse upon the house of Atreus, the one she claimed to have ended, is still at work, that her efforts to save him by sending him away failed. Orestes apologizes for bringing such terrible news to the house because they are guests. They shouldn't be bringing terrible news, but it's not their fault. And she still invites them into the house, and the three of them enter the house. Some time passes, and a woman named Cillissa exits the house in tears. She tells the chorus of how Clytemnestra had ordered her to fetch Aegisthus so that she may tell him about the news of Orestes' death. The chorus interrupts the woman. They're like, please shut up and tell us if Clytemnestra had instructed Aegisthus to come with his guard. Did he bring other people with him? Cillissa confirms, yes, Clytemnestra wants Aegisthus to come with his guards, but she hasn't given the message to Aegisthus yet. So the chorus frantically tells her, alter the message. Tell him to come alone. Say that Clytemnestra instructed that he come alone. Furthermore, when she tells him the news that Orestes is dead, she should be happy about it. Do not grieve. Do not be so clear in your emotions. Lie to him and make it seem like you are happy that Orestes is dead. She's confused about these instructions, but she does as she's told by the chorus, and she leaves again. Aegisthus enters the scene, and he declares that he was summoned by a messenger with the news of Orestes' death. He is uncertain, though, and he's wary of what this new death means for the house, considering that the house is still festering from the wounds of its last bloody murder. What's going to happen to them now if the heir is dead? Like, yes, this is good, but this can't bode well for the rest of us. He asks the chorus if the news is true or if it's merely gossip, and the chorus urges Aegisthus to hear it from the stranger himself. Sometime later, another servant emerges from the palace crying, declaring that Aegisthus is dead. He shouts for Clytemnestra, and she enters the scene, demanding to know what has happened. The servant replies that the dead are killing the living, and Clytemnestra understands immediately. She realizes that she's been tricked, that Orestes is alive, and he snuck his way into her home. She tells the servant to bring her her axe. If Orestes has come back from the dead, she must be the one to kill him. So the servant leaves, but before he can return, the doors of the palace open, and Orestes is standing there, looming over the body of Aegisthus. He apprehends Clytemnestra, and disgusted by her sorrow over Aegisthus, her lover, he declares, "You love the man? Then you shall lie in the same tomb, and you shall never desert him now he is dead." Orestes prepares himself to kill her, but she pleads to him, asking him if he has no respect for the woman that bore him, for the woman who fed him from her breast. She is his mother. At this, Orestes hesitates, but Pylades urges him to do the deed, reminding him that Apollo commanded it of him. A god told him, you must do this. Clytemnestra, sensing her doom, pleads with him once more as his mother. Enraged, Orestes reminds her of how she murdered his father, her husband. She says, "Fate has some responsibility for that, my child." And he responds, "Well, fate has dealt you this death too." She then warns him that if he's set on this decision, then he should fear a mother's curse that will descend upon him. He retorts that she abandoned him. He is no longer her son. She sold him when he was the son of a king, and then he takes her into the palace to kill her. The chorus rejoices in this victory, declaring the house to now be free of grief and the stain of murder. The palace doors open once again, and Orestes appears standing over the bodies of Clytemnestra and Aegisthus. He declares the double tyranny of their rule has been defeated, that Agamemnon's murder has been avenged. If she had been born a sea snake or a viper, would she have caused such putrefaction by her mere touch in one she had not bitten, thanks to her audacity and lawless spirit? I wish for no such mate to share my house. May the gods kill me first and childless. Oh, wait a minute. Both Orestes and the chorus realize that the curse is not in fact lifted. Madness will soon descend upon him, as the gods foretold, as his mother warned even. The furies she sent will be set upon him soon, and they will chase him into exile. But before he succumbs to the madness, he proclaims that he does not regret killing Clytemnestra. He did what justice demanded, even if he must pay the price now. The chorus urges Orestes to not speak of evil things. Don't talk about this. You won. Why are you bringing this terrible thing upon yourself? But Orestes cannot hear them anymore because the Furies have descended. No one else can see them except for Orestes. He hears them shrieking. This is the beginning of his torment. And then he rushes out, leaving the city, exiling himself, leaving the chorus to close the play with the question, when indeed will fulfillment be? Where will lulling sleep stop the energy of ruin? This is my least favorite of the plays. I hate this bitch. The play opens with Pythia, the priestess of Apollo, at his temple in Delphi. She begins her morning prayer, praising Apollo and Zeus for bringing civilization to a savage land. And she prays to Athena, Dionysus, and Poseidon. She then prays to Apollo again, asking him to grant her prophecy. She then speaks directly to the audience, telling them that anyone seeking their fortune should enter her temple. Pythia enters the temple, but then she immediately rushes out, terrified by what she had found inside. A man covered in blood, but holding an olive branch topped with a tuft of wool, standing beside the altar, waiting to be purified. Surrounding the bloody man were monstrous women of hatred and revenge, sleeping at the foot of the altar around his feet. It was the presence of these women that frightened Pythia, and she begs Apollo to come and cleanse his temple, and then she exits. The doors to the temple open, and out steps Orestes, covered in blood. He is fearful and weary of the women he has left sleeping in the temple, because they are the Erinyes, the Furies, deities of vengeance set upon him by Clytemnestra. The god Apollo appears at Orestes' call, and he curses the Furies, but explains to Orestes that he has used his divine powers to momentarily lull them to sleep. Apollo detests the Erinyes, as all gods and men do, because they punish men for crimes against the natural order. They answer the call of any victim seeking justice upon the criminal. The most powerful of those curses is that of a parent upon a child, because the Erinyes were born from the blood of Uranos when he was murdered by his son, Kronos. They will seek justice for any crime that they are called upon, but they will especially listen to the crime of a child against their parent. Apollo urges Orestes to escape from Delphi while the Erinyes are asleep to the citadel of Athena in Athens. There, the goddess will judge his case and decide whether he is guilty of matricide or if he is justified. Apollo then enlists the god Hermes to escort Orestes to Athens safely. They leave, and inside the temple, the ghost of Clytemnestra appears at the altar. She curses the sleeping Erinyes for their laziness, decrying their power, for they have disgraced her in death by letting Orestes get away. I called upon you to enact revenge on him, and you let him get away. The Furies awaken from their slumber and are appalled that Orestes has managed to escape their grasp. They are in pain because their victim, their prey, has disappeared from their sight. Their purpose is unfulfilled, and they curse Apollo for aiding Orestes in his escape, because why would a god help a criminal? We are trying to do the right thing. We are trying to dispense justice upon the criminal. Why are you helping him? They lament over the fact that this young god, this Olympian, rejects the natural order of things, as all Olympians who control the world do, because the Olympians, despite ruling over a civilized world, are young and they know nothing of justice, whereas the Erinyes, who sprang up during the old savage time of the Titans, control justice via vengeance. They know what true justice is. They know how the order of the world should be. It is at that moment that Apollo emerges with his bow and arrow strung and poised to drive out the Furies. He commands them to leave his temple, threatening and cursing and mocking them, calling them monsters and the embodiment of horror that occurs when justice and vengeance disguise themselves as one and the same. You're not seeking justice for justice's sake, you're seeking justice for bloodlust. The leader of the Furies strikes back at him, telling Apollo that he is responsible for Orestes' crime, as he was the one to convince Orestes of that path. He told Orestes, "You have to kill your mother." So why does he stand in their way when they're only doing their duties as goddesses of vengeance? Apollo argues that if they're so hell-bent on justice, then why didn't they haunt Clytemnestra over murdering her husband? And they argue that the murder of a husband by his wife's hand is not equal to the murder of a mother by the child, because the husband and wife are not of one flesh and blood. They're not related by birth unless you did an incest thing. But the laws of matrimony are not the same as sharing blood. There is more stock, more substance to the relationship between parent and child because the child is an extension of the parent. A spouse can be replaced. It's a little bit more difficult to replace a child. Apollo is shocked by the Erinyes' blatant disrespect of marriage, and he declares that Athena is the only one with the power who can decide if Orestes is guilty or not. The women, in response, swear that they will never let Orestes go free of his guilt, and they pursue their prey. Orestes arrives in Athens at the shrine of Athena, and he prays to her that she shield him from the Furies that Apollo sent him to her. The Furies arrive shortly after, and the women immediately pounce on him, tormenting him, shrieking, starting their eternal torment once again. They threaten to spill blood from his body, to suck the marrow from his bones, to punish him eternal, even in death. Orestes reports that his suffering has made him wiser, that Apollo has purged him of his sins, and that Athena will deem his actions as fair and just. The Erinyes spiral into a frenzy of wrath and vengeance, while Orestes prays to the gods until, at last, Athena enters the temple. She is armed for combat and she demands to know who it is that pollutes her temple. Furies respond, calling themselves the destroyers of life, asserting that Orestes is a murderer. Athena wonders if Orestes was forced to murder his mother, but then the Furies retort that no man could ever be forced to murder his mother. That's a conscious choice. Athena agrees to hold a trial, and the Furies allow this. Athena bids Orestes to tell her his story so that he may be cleansed, and he does, boldly stating that he did murder his mother and he did so under Apollo's guidance. Athena considers this story because, on one hand, Orestes has come to her temple as a suppliant. He has come to her for her protection, so by the rules of hospitality, she must show him mercy. However, she fears that if Orestes is found innocent of his crimes, the Furies will take their revenge on the city of Athens. She decides that she will assemble a jury of Athenian men, and they will be the one to decide Orestes' fate. So the trial begins. The Erinyes first asks Orestes if he killed his mother, and then how he killed her. Orestes responds that at Apollo's urging, he slit her throat. Orestes responds that at Apollo's urging, he slit her throat, and he maintains faith that his father helped him beyond the grave because he did this terrible act for his father. Yes, he murdered his mother, but he did it to avenge his father. And by divine decree, you have to avenge your kinsmen if they were slain in cold blood, unjustified killing. Orestes then asked the Furies why they did not punish Clytemnestra for murdering her husband, to which they responded that she didn't share blood with Agamemnon, so no mortal crime was committed. Then Apollo argues that the murder of Clytemnestra was the will of Zeus, which confuses the prosecution because Zeus himself murdered his own father, Kronos. So why would he care about a father's murder over a mother's? Should the mother who gave birth to the child not hold more importance than the father? Should she not be revered more? Well, Apollo argues that the so-called mother is no parent of a child, but the nurturer of a newly seeded embryo. The parent is the one who mounts her, while she conserves the child like a stranger for a stranger, for those fathers not thwarted by God. Then, to prove his point, he cites the birth of Athena from the forehead of Zeus. I don't like this part. The jury must now come to a decision. Athena urges the jury that they must be honest and just, because this is the first murder trial ever, and that if they make their decision in righteousness and loyalty, Athens will forever exist as a beacon of justice and civilization, unpolluted by corruption. I do want to say, Aeschylus did write this at the very height of Athens' power. So yeah, he's going to be a little biased here. The jury cast their ballots, and then Athena casts her own ballot. And while she is casting her ballot, she declares that she has been won over by Orestes and his cause, because as a woman born only of a man, she is no mother, she values men above women in all aspects except marriage, because she does not care for marriage. She is a virgin goddess. Therefore, the death of a woman who murdered her husband is less inconsequential to her in comparison to the death of a man at the hands of his wife. The fact that Clytemnestra killed Agamemnon matters more to Athena than the fact that Orestes killed Clytemnestra. She does not care for women. And then she declares, in a move that sucks beyond belief, she declares that if the jury is split in their vote, if it's a 50-50 vote, then Orestes will be declared the winner of the trial. That's not how that works. But whatever. I guess this is how democracy works. Guess what? The vote is equally split, dog, and Orestes will go free. He has been indicted. Is that the right word? I don't know. He has been proven innocent. Overjoyed, Orestes declares that Athens and Argos will remain allies forever. And then he leaves and he returns to Argos, and then nothing bad ever happens to Orestes again. And honestly, fuck that. There is more that happens in the play, like Orestes leaves and then there's like 3 more pages of action and dialogue. I don't super care for it because I'm only here for Orestes. But the gist of that is that the Erinyes are bought by Athena and Athens. They're bought by Big Athens. They're renamed the Eumenides, which translates to the gracious ones. And that's how the play ends. Yep. They were goddesses of vengeance and wrath against the unjust, and then they were sanitized to be peaceful and palatable. And Orestes got away scot-free. So anyways, thank you so much for watching, listening, laughing, loving. I love the House of Atreus, not only because of the drama, but because myths that revolve around cursed royal houses, such as the houses of Mycenae and Thebes, were likely used at the time to explain the collapse of Bronze Age Greece. It's also why we have the story of the Trojan War. It serves the same function to explain how all of these great families that were descended from gods disappeared, how they were completely extinguished. But yeah, I love the House of Atreus. Do I think that the ending of the Oresteia as written by Aeschylus is bad? Yeah, I do. I don't think it should be that easy to get rid of a generation's long curse. Like curse upon curse upon curse upon curse that's been stacked on top of each other. That's going to be hard to get rid of. I think it would be more compelling if Orestes was cursed for the rest of his life, if he was driven to madness, to death. We also do have to consider Elektra. I don't mention it because she kind of disappears after Libation Bear. She just doesn't show up again. But in Elektra by Sophocles, which is another play, I love that play. No, it's not in that one. It's in Orestes by Euripedes that Elektra appears again. And it's kind of like Eumenides, but I think that Orestes by Euripides is a very good play, except for the last 2 pages. And the last 2 pages are the worst thing I've ever read in my life. But in that play, Elektra gets married to Pylades. Weird. And I just think that they both should have suffered and or died. I think that if you're going to bring an end to a great and powerful house that has been cursed beyond belief through unjustly spilled blood, I think that the only way to end a curse of that magnitude is to destroy the carriers of that curse completely. And I think that's a really depressing take, but I do think it's the correct one. Anyways, thanks so much for being here. Hope you like it. See you later. Bye.